Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Whether you're here in the Cayman Islands or if you're listening to us overseas via the web, I am your host, Orit Connor, and I want to welcome you on this Friday morning, June 19th, 2015. Summer is coming pretty soon now for those kids coming out of school. They will have, hopefully, a good vacation. Hopefully, for those who are old enough to be employed, we hope that the government and government agencies have some summer jobs planned, for them, statutory authorities, government companies. Find something for young kids to do. I'm sure that the sporting organizations, the Cayman Islands Football Association and others will have programs going as well. We want to encourage everyone to get involved. If you can provide any financial support assistance, if not that, then in the form of, maybe snacks or whatever for these programs, please do so. Please do so. There are many of you out there in the Cayman Islands who are, well-to-do. We use that old-time Caymanian saying that they're well-to-do and they can certainly contribute, and we know that many do. Many individuals as well as corporations do, and I just want to encourage you to continue to do that as well. Of course, For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and For the Record is designed to keep you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. This being your talk show, you're, of course, encouraged to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. And if you're unable to call in, then certainly we want to thank you for listening. But those of you who have the privilege and who want to call in, you can call us on a toll-free number provided courtesy of Lime. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then you can also email us at fortherecord. That is one word, fortherecord at candw.ky. Before I introduce my guest this morning, I have a little bit of housekeeping that I want to do, and I'm going to make this announcement now, and then I will repeat it at the end of the show as well. The Central Scranton Community Committee, in conjunction with the Department of Children and Family Services Community Development, they will be celebrating Father's Day. That celebration will take place tomorrow, this Saturday, tomorrow, June 20th, 2015, and it'll start at 6 p.m. in the Central Scranton Park in Georgetown. Of course, there will be entertainment. There will be a fashion show, Dad with a Swag fashion show. There will be a karaoke competition, lots of clean fun, and of course, if you're in Georgetown and if you're in the Scranton area, food is going to be there as well. Really, really good food. And of course, everyone is welcome to attend. They're also going to have prizes up to $500 in prizes as well. If you want any additional information on this, you can call 916-1578 or 916-7633 or 925-4083 or 916-5938. So remember, tomorrow, Saturday, June 20th, 6 p.m. Central Scranton Park, a Father's Day celebration everyone is invited to attend, and I encourage you to please attend. Of course, today is Friday, and we have the McField Saunders show today as well. I want to say again, gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Mr. McField, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. OC, Mr. For the Record. Your call came, as usual, on Thursday, and I'm here with you and with my colleague Sanders. So it's the call, and then it's Sanders, and he calls, and then we're here together. So
Chris,
we're happy to be here with you again on another Friday.
I'm happy to have you as well. Chris, good morning. How are you?
Morning, OC. It's great to be here. And as Steve said, the call came in. I know it's Father's Day weekend coming up, so I just want to wish all the dads happy Father's Day. I noticed on Facebook a lot of parents had pictures up of their kids graduating, so congrats to them. There were several of them well, and I guess as I'm looking forward to mine next year too, so I can only imagine what they're feeling. I know Graham is listening. He called me last night and he says to me, listen, I'm missing Jim this morning, so you guys better bring it. By the way, what are you guys going to talk about today? So I know Graham is listening. And also I want to congrats Don Seymour on his Wall Street 50 recognition. I think that's great news. And I mean, it's always good to see a Cayman and do well. And if anyone understands Don's story, it's really a very inspiring story. I mean, looking at where his mother is coming from and everything else, and what Don did and his own challenges, and even starting up as a businessman, it's just phenomenal. And I just want to say a big shout out to Don and all the staff at DMS that made that possible also.
Okay. We have lots that we want to talk about. Last week, we said that we wanted to talk about some issues with banking in the Cayman Islands, retail banking. And, of course, Chris will bring a different perspective to it, because he comes from, his background is in that area. That's where he's employed now as well. And, of course, all of you who have the opportunity to have a bank account have had some experience, with the retail banking industry here in the Cayman Islands. We're going to talk about that. There are some people who say, well, the legacy situation, we need to put that to rest now. But we can't, because we still have to continue to talk about it in different respects. Whether or not we will refer to Mr. Legge himself, or whether we'll refer to the publication, or we will just talk in general terms, is another matter. And we do that not out of fear of anything, but just like how they do in the United States. We see the unfortunate situation in Charleston, South Carolina, where 9 persons in a church, black people in a church, were massacred, were murdered by a terrorist, and that debate is going on in the United States now, whether or not it's, terrorism, or whether or not it's a hate crime. They're having to come to grips with that, because they have been reluctant in the past to label their own as terrorists. Everybody else, FARS is a terrorist group. Fatah is a terrorist group. Palestinian organization is a terrorist group, but they have always been reluctant to name their own as terrorists, but they're dealing, with that now as well. But if you notice that the news media, what they've done is they have never referred to the alleged perpetrator by name. They refuse that. And the reason that they do that is to deny him the recognition that he has been seeking, the notoriety that he has been seeking, denying him that. So maybe we will do that, as well with the publication. But there were 2 instances that I want to bring to our listeners' attention. And, most of, a lot of our listeners out there, probably all of them, are certainly well-read and keep up with the news. But this week, there was a situation in California where we had the collapse of a balcony where some students who were on a work program in the United States were apparently celebrating, partying. The balcony collapsed. Unfortunately, 6 persons, young people, lost their lives. 5 of them were Irish nationals. The New York Times, in reporting the incident, talked about, the fact of these kids thrashing apartments and the drinking and the noise and everything. And the Prime Minister of Ireland came down very hard on the New York Times for reporting. Instead of talking about the unfortunate incident, they inserted this whole issue of the drinking and stuff to really distract from the real tragic incident that happened. Of course, the New York Times turned around and apologized to, later on for it. That is what responsible journalism is all about. That when you make a mistake, at least you have the humanity in you that you can turn around and you can apologize for it. Now take that and juxtapose that against what happened with the Donneray Connor incident. And just let me, for the benefit of my listening audience, yes, I have an interest in it because he was my first cousin.
You should.
But I'm not saying that just simply because he was my first cousin, but I'm doing it to compare the two situations where, again, the article about his accident being killed,
Yes.
but yet they highlighted his criminal convictions instead of the other issues.
That had nothing to do with the accident, because now that the driver has been charged with causing death by dangerous driving, that had nothing to do with how he died.
Exactly. Then we had another incident, just the most recent one that I mentioned in Charleston, South Carolina. In yesterday's paper, one of the major papers in Charleston, in reporting the story, what did they have right in the right-hand corner of the newspaper front page? An ad about either a gun show or a gun shop. Again, quite insensitive, brought to their attention, and they apologize for it. But it goes to see you, those publications are respectful to their audiences, right? We have not heard any apologies from the publication. We have not heard any apologies from the editor-in-chief.
Sure, because he's not respectful to us, and the problem is that he doesn't believe that we have any strength, any moral or physical or national strength to do anything, anything. And so, really, the only thing that the only purpose the newspaper serves is an economic purpose, and that is on his behalf.
Yep.
To extract money from people who he has no find the word, Chris, who he has no respect for.
Mm-hmm.
And so he really doesn't care for us. And we, on the other hand, are not vigilant enough to can put pressure on his newspaper to force him to apologize. So there's a hiatus there. There's a standoff, and he really doesn't care, because who are we? Like I said, we are mud people. We are just the local native people, and all he's interested in how much money we can pay for an ad in the newspaper. He doesn't really care about us at all. But in North Carolina, you have people that will demonstrate against you. You have people that will go to the ends and lobby against you, and so that they are very worried that their economic base will fall apart. But here, they beat us, and as I have said before, they push us down in the back house. And if anybody don't understand what that means the outside toilet. They push us down there and they sink us in the crap, and you know what that means. And then while we're sinking, they're taking $1 from us before we sink it and take it on
The thing about it, Steve, there's an old saying that says an error does not become a mistake until you fail to correct it.
Yes.
One thing I've learned is that we're very forgiving people. And if you make an error, just say you're sorry. We'll move on. That's how we are. But the thing about it is, I remember way back when I was in the civil service, I think it was Maybrick or Colonel who would use the term the silent majority.
Yes.
And what people need to realize is that what we need in this country is a vocal majority in order for democracy to work, and in order for consumer to be protected. And this going back, OC, to when you're talking about even the fees that are being charged. Mm-hmm. What people need to realize is just simply this: businesses in general, I'm not going to just pick on banks, businesses in general will rip you off. They will try to take as much as they can from you because there's nobody stopping them from doing it. And that's the bottom line. Until we have consumer protection in this country. I mean, right now, my wife is dealing with one incident where she bought a treadmill. This is over $1,000 she basically spent for a treadmill. 1 month warranty. You know what I mean? And from we got the treadmill, it was been defective, and she's been pretty much fighting with them now in terms of just trying to
purchase locally.
Yeah, purchase. Well, I told her to buy it locally, and I'm not going to say it was a mistake because I wanted her to buy it locally. So if anything go wrong, you spend that kind of money, you can take it back. You bring that in from overseas, you're pretty much then, you know what I mean? But these are the kind of stuff, and what people fail to realize is that at some point, the time for talking is going to be over, and then people are going to start demanding action.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I am your host, Orrit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Mr. Steve McPhail, Mr. Christopher Saunders. When we come back, we're just going to talk a little bit longer about the situation in Charleston, South Carolina. We're going to look at the perpetrator of that crime. We're going to look and see what happened to Timothy McVeigh. So if you have an opportunity, you can Google him if you don't remember him. And how quickly it was that they executed him after his conviction for the bombings in Oklahoma City. Of course, when it comes to the two, the numbers are completely different, but we want to strike that comparison. Folks, please stay tuned. We will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Mr. Steve McPhail, Mr. Christopher Saunders. I refer to Fridays as the McPhail-Saunders Show, and you can do the same thing too if you want. Talking about Timothy James McVeigh. He was an American terrorist, so Wikipedia describes him as a terrorist, who detonated a truck bomb in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City in April 19th, 1995. 168 people were killed and over 600 were injured in that. In 4 years after McVeigh's conviction, he was put to death by lethal injection. Pretty quick. Coming from the American judicial system. Pretty quick because people stay on death row for quite a while.
15 years.
Yes, And I'm wondering, now, first of all, I think South Carolina does have the death penalty, and if it is considered a hate crime and the federal government takes it up, then they can certainly convict him as well, which was what was done in the case of Timothy McVeigh. But when you listen to all of the people who are given comments on the television, the black people in Charleston, the church people, they're all so forgiven. You don't hear them condemning the gunman at all. As a matter of fact, it was their open arms that allowed him to come into their Bible study.
Yes.
And as a result of that, kill them. It was their welcoming spirit that allowed that to happen. But it goes to show you the strength of their conviction and the foundation that they have in terms of their Christian heritage, their belief. That is, a really testament to those the people in South Carolina, in particular Charleston, and those who are directly affected by this. What is interesting, though, and this brings us back to our colonial days, and the colonial legacy was the photographs that were taken of this young man, and when he had these badges, one representing
South Africa.
South Africa and the one representing
Apartheid era.
Rhodesia. And
Yes.
Mr. McField, you of course will remember the days of Ian Smith,
That's
the
right.
man who did not
That's
want
right.
to give up power there.
That's
and
right.
the United Kingdom government, the negotiations took place on board a warship
That's
off the
right.
coast of Africa in relation to it. Eventually that came, and of course, the man now who is really, to a certain extent, some see him as terrorizing Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe.
Yes.
He was in prison for several years. There was another gentleman by the name of Joshua Nkomo
Nkomo, yes.
as well. But again, the whole colonial legacy of where in South Africa, apartheid was allowed to come about. The people there were able to go to South Africa, take over the lands, enslave the people. Rhodesia, it was done there, but in the late 60s, early 70s,
Yes.
that was nipped in the bud. And then when you look at the situation in America, in the Caribbean, all over the place, we ask ourselves the question, how did we get here?
Yes.
How did we get here? We got here through a very, very brutal system, the slave trade. And those people, those of us, people of color, do not ever, ever forget where we came from, right? We talk about the Holocaust, and the Holocaust was a terrible, terrible experience for people. Slave trade, much, much more, because at least with the Holocaust, the Jews are now able to confront the perpetrators of those crimes, bring a lot of them to justice. We can't even get an apology from
Any of them.
the places like the United Kingdom or others. We can't get, people are talking about reparations for the slave trade. We can't even get an apology, much less reparations. I'm told that we have one call. I know, Mr. McField, you want to comment on it. Let's ask that caller to hold for a second and give you an opportunity to comment.
Yeah, and when I first came back to the country in the early '80s and stuff, and I read some of the periodicals and some of the magazines about there was no slavery here, and then when I started to enlighten people, I got a lot of flack. I remember a certain gentleman, colonial gentleman, coming to my house. I was surprised that he would come to my house. He came to interview me, and he was working for some paper or some station then. And I thought he was going to interview me about. I thought he was going to interview me about how I had become a lawyer, a professional. He started asking me all of these things about my beliefs and whether I think Castro was a great man and whether I think this and that. And I thought that very strange, and I then became very defensive. And then I never spoke to that man for probably for years. And I happened to I met that man at a social the other evening, and he was sitting across the room, and he came and he's brought his chair and he sat by me, and he says to me, and my wife was sitting on the other side, and he says to me, "Are you still making trouble?" That's what he said to me. "Are you still making trouble?" And I never spoke to him. I never said a word to him. I just looked at him. I just stared at him. And he looked at me, and he understood my body language, and he turned the other way. And then he turned around to me to say something with a laugh, a smile. I never said a word to him. My face had a frozen mask, but became a frozen mask. And that's the whole situation.
Of course, if that was in the 70s, he would have gotten. You would have floored him.
Oh, definitely. But you can't do that. You can't do that now, and you can't stand up for what you believe in, because they have the upper hand, and the doors will be closed to you. Mm-hmm. You will go to knock on doors, and no door's going to be open. And then the people that you want to support you, your own people, like you said, are similar to the people in Charleston. They are the ones who says, "Oh, I remember my grandmother saying to me, 'Oh, you have to give up your rights for peace. And I had this huge argument with my grandma to give up my rights for peace. When I give up my rights for peace, then what do you expect them to do? You expect them to keep me alive? They're gonna beat me down. And so I had to fight for my rights. But the problem that I find here too is that we are so forgiving, and we are so forgiving that we allow people like Leggett to come back in and start to lobby. I don't know if he did the lobby or what, but have the
Chamber of Commerce.
the Chamber of Commerce now come back and say, no, you guys change your mind and give him your money. It's going to look bad and what people are going to say and all that kind of stuff. And I heard some people saying, well, we should we should rethink what we did and stuff. We should not give him a penny.
What I can understand is that the Chamber of Commerce, which represent the business people, this man has basically accused them more than anybody else too of pushing or basically making money in a corrupt society. I mean, they're the business leaders. They're the ones that the fingers are most pointed at.
Okay.
And for them to not have said anything to begin with, and then this credibility.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My guest in studio with me this morning, Mr. Steve Macfield, Mr. Christopher Saunders. When we come back, we're going to do a little bit naming and shaming because someone has taken a peek in that publication and we see some adverts from some statutory authorities and government companies. We want to know, why are those ads still being run in that publication? Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I am your host, Dorrit Connor, and I am hosting For the Record, the Macfield Saunders segment, Friday, June 19th, 2015. We have one caller online. We're going to go straight to the phone line. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC, and good morning to your panel.
Good morning. How are you doing? Haven't heard from you in a while.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning.
Morning, dear.
I'm fine, thank you. This morning, I wanted to call in regards to my water drive, and you did hit on it about the kids coming out of school at the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
So just want to say, that I want to do the water drive and hoping that I'll get the same sponsors or even them and more. And I'm just hoping that we'll be able to do this water drive with the help of the people of this island. And also looking some snacks for these kids because I know some of these kids will be spending time with their grandparents. Not every kid's going to be fortunate to go to a camp this summer.
Mm-hmm.
Parents still have to work. So I'm just asking the public if they're interested in doing some donation of water and snacks to these kids. They can call me at 928-0995. 928-0995. And when I see the sponsors coming in, then I'll come back and make an announcement of what the water can be, deliver or given away to these individuals. And just hope that they look into our kids and have some compassion towards them.
Sure.
Ms.
I was going to ask a question. I was going to say, I know, your colleagues in the taxi industry are all hard-working people, but, if they, you ever thought about, or maybe you have been getting some assistance from them, sort of like they're pooling their resources and doing it as an association as well, that would help to heighten their profile and also, spread a little bit of goodwill throughout the community because, sometimes taxi drivers on the road get a bad name just because of the actions of, a few bad apples in the bunch. So it might not be a bad idea for you to try to get your colleagues together, on that for them to assist as well, if you haven't already done so.
Well, I did it twice now, this summer and December for Christmas, and I got a couple of good compliments from them, but that was just about it.
No,
and
they needed to do more than compliment.
Personally, I don't care who hears this and who want to interpret it their way, but I'm telling you right now, I don't think there will be 10 taxi drivers up there who will be interested in donating some water Because the first thing they say that, oh, we're Jamaicans, they're not going to want our water. Or they're going to say, hey, Caymanians don't need nothing, they got everything, which is not true.
Mm-hmm.
But I will leave that there because it's a ticklish situation to even try to go there and ask them for any correspondence in regards to the water, because the mentality that they have is totally different from these people who've been donating water to me.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Mm-hmm.
It's totally different. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to all of my great donors, and hopefully we get some new ones come on if the taxi drivers want to help. I appreciate it. But to me to go with them to that story, let me tell you, you'd be burying me over the weekend. You'd be burying me over the weekend. I would like you to announce it a couple of times, for me, as well as when you come back on next week, please.
Okay, and when is it going to start? When is the drive going to start?
I'm not sure. I would love to start it as soon as possible. As soon as I can get some donors to come and say, hey, come pick up this water, or what the case may be, and then I can set a date for July, the first week of July, second week of July.
Okay.
As soon as I see some water coming in, some snacks coming in, then I can come back and say, hey, this is the date and this is where the location is going to be.
Excellent. We will certainly assist you with that.
Well,
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Jan,
Uh-huh.
this is Chris. I'll be the first to publicly say I'll make a personal donation. So I will call you after the show and tell me exactly what it is you want. Just make a list, and I will try to organize for them to be picked up at one of the outlets this weekend, whether it be water, juices, or chips or something. So
Okay, I thank you.
Yep.
I thank you so much.
What you're doing, and thank you also for what it is that you're doing. If more people had take the approach that you take, our home would have been a much better place right now.
And Ms. Jan, do you have to buy the water from the government?
I think Flowers
From
get it.
Foster's.
From
I buy the water from Price Right. And if people want to get the 5-gallon water from Flowers, I will be held responsible for the bottles, and I'll take that chance. If they want to go to Flowers and buy some of the bottles of water, leave it there, and I pick it up, and I'll make sure I get the bottles returned back to Flowers. So I've been doing some with Flowers and Foster's. So whichever way they want to go, I'm with them. Wherever they want to bring the stuff from, I'm with them.
Okay, all right.
Bring it in. Let us take care of our kids for the summer, not just for the summer, but all year round. But they're home now, so they need to be kept cool, calm, and selective with some snacks and some water and so forth. And they're going to spend a lot of time with their grandparents, too, because their mothers have to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Ms.
grandmother need to eat, too.
Thank you, Ms.
Yep.
Jan. We'll certainly be in
Thank you,
touch.
Ms. Jan.
We have 3 callers online, gentlemen. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Connor. How you
Mr.
doing?
Brown, good morning. I'm fine. How are you?
Very good. Mr. Macfield, Mr. Saunders. Good
Morning,
morning,
Quince.
Good morning, Mr. Brown.
Good. How are you gentlemen doing today?
We're okay. We're fine. We're here behind the mic.
Vertical and moving.
Yes.
Absolutely. TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. The weekend is here. Now, on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm often very busy with my radio in that there are 2 shows on. It's the For the Record on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and of course the other show on the other station, Crosstalk, that's on every weekday. But as I said, those 3 days I'm in between. So which means last Friday, when a female caller called in, happened to be my relative, she would have said what she had to say, but I thought it was one-sided in that it was only her perspective. I didn't hear the call, because at that point I would have switched back to the other station.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of heard about what the female caller had to say in regards to why I'm not working, and if I'm correct, the caller went into a bit of my personal life.
Yeah, and we tried to limit that to sort of like, cut that off to a certain extent, because we really didn't think that it should have boiled down to that, even though she was apparently responding to your boycott or your statement in terms of your boycott of the CNFC, I think it is, something like that, yeah?
Yeah, the Cayman National Cultural Foundation, right. A company that has been very good to me, let me say. A lot of my artistic training came about as a result of the Cayman National Cultural Foundation. However, like Radio Cayman, my former employer, I worked for Radio Cayman for close to 6.5 years. It is my opinion that there comes a time that those at the leadership level need to move on. I don't care how good you are. You could be the president of the United States. You get 2 terms. It's time to pass on the baton. Anyway, this is why we have corruption. So anyway, I said what I had to say, but what she didn't say, though, is her workload is so heavy that she cannot manage me, be my manager, Quincy Brown, the singer, the actor, the comedian, the storyteller, and work for a cultural organization that has kept me down. You see, it's a conflict of interest. She didn't say that. And she also did not say, you see, your own life bites you the hardest, you know. And I say this to have respect with her as well, because she has been good to me. But I say it as I see it. What she also did not say is she once said to me, I cannot understand why God has blessed you with so much talent and me so little. Almost a voice of envy and jealousy. It's very difficult when you have to work in cases of nepotism. I mean, if I became the prime minister, it would probably be best that my permanent secretary is not my aunt, cousin, mother, father, or brother, because it's very difficult when you're working with close family. Having said that, in the Cayman Islands, most of us as Caymanians are related one way or the other. But the Cayman National Cultural Foundation continues to do great work. This is not a personal attack against the director, the artistic director, or the managing director. They have served well. They have made their contribution. I'm only saying that it's time for changes at the top when it comes to the board and the staff. Listen, I work hard. I'm a passionate individual. We all have our issues, so I don't need anyone to call in a talk show to highlight them. I can do that myself, because my life has been an open book. So why am I not employed? Because people fear me. They're threatened. You know, I don't, the NWDA, my case worker, is telling me that I come across as a know-it-all, someone who is overly confident and too assertive. Well, that's their opinion. I took it on board. I need to tweak in my life where I need to tweak. But perhaps I've burned too many bridges. Yeah. And that's a text that the lady sent me as well.
Okay, Chris, Quincy, we got several people queued up, so want to thank you for that. Certainly feel free, to buzz us back, on some more issues as well if you want to. Let's go to the next caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Orban.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
Again, good morning to Mr. Mike Field and Mr. Saunders.
Good morning, sir. Good
morning.
Yes, sir, the Georgetown dump issue. If we continue on a daily basis to have more garbage going into the dump than what's coming out, that dump is not going anywhere. And you have to agree with the people of Bordentown when it comes to them feeling confident that the same thing won't happen in Bordentown after probably a 20-year period. Mm-hmm. But if I was a Bordentowner, and the government had these things in place, such as garbage trucks that pick up just bottles, cans, and plastic, and so forth for recycling. And also, there need to be laws put in place that as a community, the citizens of this country have to be responsible to have their garbage sorted out. Garbage cans with bottles on it, written on the top, cans and plastic. And if the garbage isn't sorted out, your garbage will not be collected. People might say, well, I'll just leave it there. Well, if it's left there after a period of time, those individuals will then be fined for not having their garbage sorted out. And also, that the people of Bordentown will have the first opportunity of operating this facility. Because by that being done, I myself, as a citizen, will be confident that they will genuinely be doing their work from their heart and knowing for sure that this thing will work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. I guess that caller is assuming then, or he supports the whole idea of the waste management facility being placed in Bordentown.
Yes, he does.
I think, whether we want to accept it or not, there needs to be a national conversation in terms of what we're going to do with regards to the dump. Now, I will tell you point blank, as a resident of Bordentown, so Steve O.C. and many people I've spoke to, no one wants a dump in Bordentown. Let's make that perfectly clear. Because my biggest issue with that from get go when they're talking about putting a waste management facility there is like, okay, fine, you set up this waste management facility. The day that facility breaks down and trucks show up, you know what, someone is going to say, we can't take any garbage today, but put it over there. And then that's where a dump is going to start. So no one sets out saying that they want a dump. But either way, I mean, and this is a situation that one mindset we need to change in this country. This is not a problem for the government. This is a problem for the people. The people need to realize that we are the government. I mean, it's a government of the people, for the people, by the people. Those guys are just our elected representative within this mechanism. But that is our problem that we need to deal with. And when you're talking about laws, look at the guy that they caught that was literally dumping garbage and put the big sign, "Catch me if you can." They did catch him. And what did they do? Did they fine him? No. Did they name him and shame him? No. So what's the use of having laws if you're not going to enforce them? So it makes no use to set this up and then at the end of the day, nothing comes out of it. Again, no teeth. So we need to do a better job than this. Okay. But that's a different story for a different time.
Certainly, folks. I want to remind you, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orit Connor, and my guest in the studio with me, Mr. Christopher Saunders, Mr. Steve Macfield. We're going to go to a commercial break at this point in time. Please stay tuned because we will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I am your host, Orit Connor. My guest with me, the other half of For the Record, the Macfield Saunders Show, Mr. Christopher Saunders and Mr. Steve Macfield. Two things I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about the adverts in the publication. And this will give representatives from those entities an opportunity, if they don't want to call in live on the show, to send an email to fortherecord@candw.ky to explain why ads are still appearing in the publication despite the motion that was passed in the Legislative Assembly in relation to government paid advertising in the publication. We have adverts by the Port Authority, the Department of Commerce and Investment, that's a government portfolio run by an elected minister. We have the Cayman Islands Airport Authority. We have the Central Registry, again, falls one of the portfolios that falls under an elected minister. Public Works Department, and we have Judicial Administration. Now, Judicial Administration, I can understand to a certain extent because of the separation of powers, Mr. Macfield, and maybe the judicial system does not want to get involved in politics. So
yes.
I believe in their case that they should be allowed to act independently, and so that there isn't any perceived conflict of interest.
Yeah, and
but
so we should not direct what they should do.
Right. But I'm going to repeat them again. Port Authority, Department of Commerce and Investment, CIAA, Central Registry, Public Works Department. Why are you still continuing to advertise in the publication? Is it because you have already paid for these ads and you have to run them? Ask for a refund of your money. Or some people wouldn't even mind if you lose it altogether. Many of you government departments lose the people's money anyway for other reasons, and you don't necessarily account for it at the end of the day. So that much more won't hurt too much, but you need to say why, because the government has said, and the government then needs to respond. The elected government or the whole Legislative Assembly needs to respond as well. Why is this being allowed to continue when you have said otherwise?
Yes,
so,
and that is in contrast. That is in contrast to the fact that Ezard Miller in Northside needed some money for the schools, to buy some more equipment. And if I read the paper, I didn't listen to the debate on the floor of the Legislative Assembly, but if I read the paper, I think that one of the ministers said that they were gonna gratuitously allow him to get the money to buy materials for the schools for the children. I mean, here's the hypocrisy, and as far as we are concerned in our country, hypocrisy has no bounds. Here we are, every minute, every time that we have an audience before us, we always stating that our children are our most precious resources, and then we have to gratuitously take money from someplace else to buy equipment for our children to learn in the schools and to prepare them to become the men and women of the future. And yet we can spend all of those, add some of them are half, some of them nearly full page in the compass for, with a man who tells us that we are all corrupt, and that corrupt is endemic in our society, and that we are a corrupt society.
And brag about a surplus.
And brag about a surplus.
Okay, we another email that we got from one of our regular listeners and who emails in as well. And she says here to Mr. Macfield and Mr. Saunders. So she is definitely recognizing that it is the Macfield Saunders show. Please note that because of the excessive flooding which came up from Lookout Gardens, the water has brought fishes, huge rats, and snakes coming on land in the Cumber area. Our representatives were informed, and also Mr. Roydell Carter from the Department of Environmental Health. No one has responded or came to inspect or to set rat poison from that department. The people of this area would like to know if there is a plan in action at the moment to deal with the problem, because every year it is the same. Promise, promise, like the dump for a political football.
Yeah, well, Twyla, I'm glad you're listening too. We're actually, gentleman Yanel spoke about, we're coming down there actually this morning at 11 a.m. This gentleman was one of the persons who were involved years back on the Master Ground Transportation Plan that Dr. Pearson was trying to push through. And life is a funny thing in that so many people opposed it back then, but if we had taken the time out to enact that plan from so long ago, we'd have avoided a lot of the costs that we have now and a lot of the problems that we have. So kudos to Dr. Pearson for being visionary. This is almost 27 years ago when he had proposed the Master Ground Transportation Plan, thereabouts. So we're coming on there at 11 o'clock. I will call you after the show and see if you're available or if your schedule is okay. I've confirmed that time with him and he's okay with it. So we'll be down there, and I'm almost willing to bet that you're going to see other representatives down there, because the last time when she had first messaged in and she mentioned it, a friend of mine, I won't say which group, but you can figure out which group, called me like, Chris, you put me on the spot, so now I have to run down to that whole area. So again, we will see how politics play out in this one, but we'll be there at 11 o'clock this morning.
And Twyla, let me tell you, only the pathological romantic do not agree that this is not the age of the little person, the little people. You are the little people, and that's the reason why your neighborhood is not going to get us the flooding solution. Randai Gardens had the same solution as you did, and Randai Gardens same problem, and it was fixed immediately because the water was going over into the South Sound properties that were expensive. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want that to happen, and so they fixed that quickly so that the people in South Sound who had the expensive homes didn't get the flooding that came from Randai Garden. So that was done.
The culverts.
The culverts. But listen, when I was a member of the National Roads Authority, they asked us to look into that. The central government asked us to look into your flooding problem. We brought in an engineer, and he told us that the solution to that problem was to put a pumping station near there. And speaking to you, one of the stalwart men in your community, Mr. Neville McCoy, I think it was last Saturday. Speaking to him, he suggested that the pumping station should be out near where the post office is, because that's the higher ground, and run the pipes underground. The engineer said that it needs a pumping station under there to run the pipes underground and to run the water off into the sea, across under the road into the sea, and that would solve the situation. we said that we could do it from our budget, but the government will have to pay us back, and we were told that if we had used our money to do it, that we were not going to get the money back from the central government to put into in our road fund, and we didn't do it. Now that is the solution to the problem. What they did, they went and they dug a pond that was existing right behind Miss Mary Lawrence's house, the former Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, for the water to go over there. But when the water floods that floods, and I understand that she was flooded. So snakes and rats and all that sort of stuff, and the fact that your home is flooded and 2 and 3 and 4 inches of water in your room, and that all your furniture you have to throw it out. They really don't care about you, because you do not live in a splashy neighborhood, and in a neighborhood where people have their Mercedes Benz and all that kind of stuff parked. So what we are going to have to do, Twyla, is that we are going to have to raise the money ourselves to solve our own problems, and we have to start thinking about that. And I would like to, along with Chris and whoever comes with him, start thinking about trying to have some sort of stuff with Rexy and all those people to start raising awareness in our district, to raise some funds to solve our problems. I don't know how much the pumping station is going to cost now and the piping under the ground, but that is the solution to that. And that is the only solution. If that doesn't happen, every time it rains hard, and you're going to get flooded out, and you're going to have to keep buying boat furniture. We're sorry, but like I said, only the pathological romantic does not believe that this is not the age of the little man, the poor person. You're not I believe you fall into that category, and that's the reason why they don't care if snakes and rats and stuff and dirty water comes into your house and your furniture is destroyed.
Chris, is there a need? And when you listen to the Finance Committee, and I was mentioned this to MLA Art McLean on Wednesday, that some of the minutia that they have to go through with dealing with a covered area for the North Side primary school, the little details that they have to go and fight for, isn't there justification for something like a constituency development fund, like what they have in Jamaica, where monies are earmarked for the representatives in those constituencies to spend to do certain things. And of course, at the end of the day, there has to be proper accountability and everything. But who knows better in terms of the needs and what to do in the communities than the people who live there?
I will say this much, and people need to go back to the basics. The government didn't form the people. It was we, the people, that formed the government. And we formed the government with 3 basic things in mind: to protect our life, to protect our liberty, and to protect our property. And those are the 3 basic functions of government. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, over the years, and like with any young democracy, you'll go through your teething problems, you go through your development problems. But people need to understand that the problems in the country can only be fixed by the people within the country. And that's really what it's going to take. One of the things that I would have loved to seen is the district council set up.
Yes.
And on top of all of that, which is even something per the Constitution, and each council be given a budget, and that budget can be either as a percentage of the revenues of cars registered within the district, a percentage of planning fees within the district, or even transfer payments from the central government from that standpoint. We need more people involved in our country. And one of the problems that we do have with politicians is that once they grab this power, they feel as if though getting the people involved is them giving up something. It's as if though they want the country to be beholden to them. And if anyone honestly believes that 18 people can be ultimately responsible for this entire country, they're sadly mistaken. More people need to be involved. And I like what Mr. Macfield suggested with regards to the pumping station. And you know what? I am also getting sick and tired of the fact that every time rain falls, and we are now in the hurricane season and the rainy season, we have 10 inches as soon as you have 10 inches of water, people are beginning to suffer, not just even in Bodden, but also in other parts of Georgetown also. And then for me, the audacity and the temerity of the government to sit down and brag about the hundreds of millions of dollars in surplus over the last 2 years, yet you can spend millions of dollars on these reports, and people in the country ultimately still suffering like what Twyla and other people in that area is going through. So you know what? We'll go raise the money and we'll go get it done.
That's what we're going to do. We're going to get together and have a Bottom Town Development Fund, and we are going to raise the money and we are going to put it in a pumping station. We're going to do it ourselves. That's what we're going to do. Like we did in the past. We're going to have to go back there again. And like we said, if we had put in the district councils, the district council would have advised the representatives. Things would have been better, but they do not want to give up any power to the people, because we have become again enslaved by the same people and the same predators who we fear, and that is a system that will that is endemic in Cayman. And that is a system that will continue unless we do something about it. We're going to have to do something about our own district, because they're not going to do it for us. The only value that we have for them is every year to give us their vote. And it's like the joke about some electors in East End. I hear this joke all the time. They said that they didn't like Mr. Warren. They want to put Mr. Warren out. And they say, well, if you want to put Mr. Warren out, you need to put an X by his name. X him out. X him out. And the guy said, well, I don't understand how Mr. Warren gets elected every year. He said, because every time I go to the polls, I put an X by his name, I X him out. So the only importance that we have for them is 2017 again, to put X by someone's name to give them our power to go and to do what they're doing to us now. So we have to deal with that ourselves.
Well, one of the things I just want to publicly say is that I really want to thank Eddie Thompson. He was one of the first ones that reached out and said, Chris, let me come down here. Let's look and let's see what can be done. And kudos to Eddie. I mean, Eddie's a Georgetowner, but I'm glad to see people looking past their own district. So cool.
He's a good man. Ada Thompson's a good man. I like Ada Thompson, and I remember some years ago he and I were I wouldn't say we were close, but we were talking about all the issues and stuff. He's a good man, and I'm glad that he has accepted the challenge to go up there to see what
he's
can do
coming
for
at
them.
11 o'clock this morning.
So
Okay. Now we saw again in Finance Committee, and I'm really, I got to plug Radio Cayman. I'm really extremely thankful for Radio Cayman, Breeze 105.3 FM for carrying the proceedings of the Finance Committee live, because you're not getting a day or 2 days delay in terms of what is taking place there. Now we saw a huge debate. It must have went on for over an hour, where MLA Arden McLean was seeking some clarification in terms of the transfer of monies from the Environmental Protection Fund. I think a total of 5-point-something million. It was first represented as 4-point-something, but when the government sought approval from the UK Minister for the Overseas Territories, they said gave an approximation of 4 million, but it's 5-point-something million at the end of the day to use, and part of that is going to go for the environmental assessment of the port, the new port facility there. Can't we? And I think it was indicated then that there was some $52 million. I stand to be corrected, but somewhere in that area, $52 million
yes.
in the Environmental Protection Fund. Now, wouldn't something like correcting the situation in the Cumber Avenue area, and even in the Savannah area there, where you get the flooding when we get the northwesters and stuff like
Northeasters.
Can't we look at some creative way? I don't even think that we have to be creative to put a strong argument forward that both of those projects should qualify for monies out of the Environmental Protection Fund.
Because it's an environmental problem.
Yes,
it is they are environmental problems, and it would take a lot out of the fund, and that is why. That is some of the reasons why the Environmental Fund has been created, to solve those kind of problems. And I would call on the government, call on them, call on the members from North from Bodden Town to go to the cabinet and ask them to give them some money from the environmental fund to solve the problems in Comber Avenue. And I'm glad you bring it up.
And don't wait until 2017 to do
I
it.
guarantee you, the good news is that I have made an announcement that I'm going out there to raise money to do it.
Yes.
I am willing to bet you any money right now.
Yes.
Mark my words, politics is going to play, which is good that they're going to find that money now. Remember, I tell you that.
Yes.
Because they're going to be embarrassed
Yes.
if me as a private citizen go out there and fix a problem that they couldn't fix because they're surplus.
Yeah.
Remember, you heard it there first, folks.
Like how would they like snakes and rats and stuff to come into their environment and to be in their homes and to walk in their living rooms and their bedrooms underwater? How would they like that to be throwing their furniture out every time it rains hard? Like I said, hypocrisy in Cayman has no bounds.
For some strange reason, and if you listen closely to what some of them say, and just like what we sit and we choose our words carefully sometimes, some of their mindset is that the problems that people are having, it is of their own making. I've sat down there and literally heard one minister on another radio station pretty much said that, you know what, people having problems with their mortgage, it is their problems. Yet, when you look at the lack of consumer protection in this country and the ways in which businesses are designed to literally take so much out of people's pocket, where people can't even afford to save for their own retirement. You look at what has happened with fuel. You look at even some healthcare costs and everything else. They're literally having people in this country work until they die, and they're contented to maintain that system. But I'm going to tell you what, people in this country are getting fed up. They're tired of it. I mean, the quality of life is deteriorating day by day. They can't see where their kids are even going to have a better future than them. And people are going to be shocked because, you know what? That silent majority that we like to talk about, they'll just go and they'll mark that little X. And I think it's going to be a rude awakening for many people. So you know what? Like I said, the good news is I bet you they go find that money now.
Well, they should find it, Chris. And if they don't move, then we are going to have to keep our promise to do what we say.
Again, I tell you one thing. No, we are going down there today, and
exactly.
we are going to start.
Okay, gentlemen, we're going to switch gears now. We're going to go after the banks. We have two callers online, so we can't go after the banks yet. And any of you who have any loans pending with them, you have to declare an interest. You won't get an interest from them, but you will have to declare an interest. But we have two callers online. Let's take the first caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning again, gentlemen.
Good morning again, sir.
It's like I said, if we have more garbage going into the garbage dump on a daily basis than what we have coming out, that garbage dump is not going anywhere. I made a suggestion last time I called in this morning. And if you don't agree with what the problem is, you will not agree with what the solution is. What do you all suggest? What that the solution is for this problem?
Well,
thank you.
First of all, the government has said that the dump is going to remain. The facility, I won't call it a dump. The facility will remain where it is. So it would appear then that based on that decision, that whatever consultations are out there, whatever studies that are being done, it is being done with the view in mind of remediating the current facility and continuing to utilize that facility. That appears to be the situation with that. But I'll give you gentlemen an opportunity. Let's take the other call and then we can deal with both. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning, ma'am.
Okay. I just tuned in, so I don't really know what
You just tuned in? Charlene, what are you doing to me?
But anyway, I just want to ask one question, and I'm not sure if I've heard it before. Down in the Comber Avenue area, which is historical now, every time you get 2 inches of rain, you get 4 feet of flood down in there. So it tells me something, that the land is lower than the surrounding area because the surrounding areas have been built up.
That's right,
And I
ma'am.
don't-
That's right,
It's almost
ma'am.
like in a valley.
It's like a little valley.
Okay, right. Or indeed, that is where traditionally it was a water basin, we call them ponds, to hold the runoff from rains, etc. But my question is there anything like deep wells built in that area to help siphon off the water quickly?
You cannot build deep wells there, ma'am, because the water table is only like 3 to 4
Too high.
feet.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
below the
okay.
surface. So the
Okay.
water's not going to go anywhere.
Okay, so that tells me then it's an original catchment area. I'm talking about the funds available for environmental, 52 million or whatever it is. I don't know over how long a period that took to grow to 52 million, but I think they have dipped into it before, but that's not my question.
I think we dipped into it during Ivan.
Yes.
Okay. My question is, if we can see the value of that fund and the amounts of money, because I don't think $52 million in our economy is anything to sneeze at. If we don't yet understand the amount of money that flows through this country to be, I'm not going to use the word hidden, but escape taxes in other jurisdictions, and I mean hefty taxes, 50%, 33 1/3%, 18%. If we don't understand that we should be partners and people should pay for the right to do business here, not just a little government fee of $10,000 here when fees are $1 million someplace else for the same service, but really pay on something, 3%, 5%. You mean people are so cold and hard-hearted? If I say, listen, I need 3% of this 100 cents, which leaves them with 97 cents that nobody can attack or attach anything on while it passes through here. You mean they can't see the value of doing business with me? That we don't have to be begging. We are literally beggars sitting and other people are swimming in a pool of money here. Just look at the value of a fund that was created not too long ago and had already been dipped into. Look at the value of it. Are we going to remain ignorant for so long as somebody comes up, oh, we can't tax anybody because they're going to run away? Let me tell you, my math, and I always tell people math's not real good. My math says I have 15 customers and I got a new charge that is valid, and 10 say they can go someplace. It would be better for the 10 to go someplace and I got 4 that I can work with and collect that charge, rather than to have 14, 15 people stand up at my door that didn't intend to do business with me, that I could collect something. And what do I get? I get something from the 4 or 5. I'm not getting anything from the 14. So let the 10 go and let the 4 stay, 4 or 5 stay, who I can do business with and get something at the end of the day.
Okay.
We need to tax these people. It's long past now. We remain stupid. I said, well, we can't tax them. You can't tax them, and there's nothing else to get but taxes.
I'm going to have you and Mika Hurlston on here one of
Yes.
these days, Miss Charlene,
Yes.
to talk about the taxes then. I want to ask you to leave us there. We have to go to a time check and then the headline news, the 9 o'clock news. So, folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning for the Macfield Saunders show, Mr. Christopher Saunders, Mr. Steve Macfield. Please stay tuned. We're going to go to the 9 o'clock news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Dorit Connor. My guests with me this morning, Mr. Steve Macfield, Mr. Christopher Saunders. Chris, you wanted to respond? Ms. Charlene?
And thank her very much for that call. First of all, we don't have a taxing problem. What we have is a spending problem and a priority of spending problem. And this is something I want to show to Ms. Charlene, and this is coming from Economics and Statistics website, where they have the companion of statistics. Back in 2005, core government revenues was $428 million for a population of 52,466 people. By 2013, core government revenues was $635 million for a population of 55,691. What that says, for a population growth of 3,255 people, the government took an extra $207 million out of the economy. Now, no government around the world has yet to prove that taking a dollar out of the economy and putting it back in has been more efficient than leaving it there. So when people get up and talk about, oh, we need more people, we need more this, if the government is basically taking an additional $207 million out of the economy, and this is core government now, for just 3,225 people growth within the economy, we have a serious problem in this country. And then on top of that, it is what it is being spent on. Now, one of the things, I am not a fan of tax. I mean, I will make that perfectly clear. I'm just going by what I said before. But it's also important for us because people have a tendency of always looking at the financial industry first. And I think one of the things that is clear, and this is I think is part of our problem also, is that we have a financial industry that is the driver of the economy. But I don't think the financial industry have done a good job in terms of explaining the role of the financial services industry. We now live in I just want to just mention something briefly. We now live in a globalized world. With globalization come an increase in trade flows. With an increase in trade flows come an increase in investment flows. With investment flows come capital flows. And the need for tax-neutral jurisdictions such as the Cayman Islands plays an integral role. And that is the part that people need to distinguish with the Cayman Islands. We're not a tax haven, we're a tax-neutral jurisdiction. So when you have these multiple multinational corporations doing business in several countries, they need a jurisdiction that is tax neutral sometimes just to balance certain things out. And I would love to have a separate show on that just to kind of explain to people how that works. But what has not happened, and this is where the problem is one thing for us to understand the economy. So yes, I want you to think of the economy as a truck, where the financial services may be the drivers for the simple fact that they drive most of the economy. But at the end of the day, you still need something to move it. I mean, the gasoline, and within the gas that actually moves our local economy is consumption and development, in the sense that government derives the bulk of the taxes from when we consume stuff, and also development, again, which is also another form of consumption to some extent. So that is how our economy works, and we need to actually sit down and explain to the people a little bit more in terms of how our economy works, and then we can start looking at our government spend versus what the expense is. And this is one of the reasons why I keep pounding over and over that we need to have a clear vision for this country in terms of where we're going, and then more importantly, everyone needs to understand what that vision is. If you say to an American today, what is it means to be an American? Oh, they will tell you freedom, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the whole 9 yards. We need a clear vision for the Cayman Islands. The last one we had was done, I think it was in 1998, where we tried that Vision 2008. That was by the governor. And again, it was little buy-in from the public. Everyone that ran in the 2000 election said that they would have supported all of this kind of stuff because it sounded good at the time, and nothing was done. But before we can get a good vision, we also need good leadership within the country, and we also need people to be informed within the country in terms of where we're going. Now, coming back to the issue that the other caller had with regards to the dump, I'm going to tell you, the solution has got to start from within the homes. We need district recycling centers. We need those set up within the district. We need people to start sorting from within the homes. Ideally, what I would really like is to see more of that stuff being privatized to young Caymanian entrepreneurs, where you have different people collecting. So you sort like plastic, stuff like glass and so forth. You start that from within the homes. You have 3 different type of bins where people put certain things in, and on different days or different routes, whatever, those people come and pick it up. And what the government role is in that is to make sure they go around, one, to make sure people are actually recycling the way they should be recycling, not just dumping everything together. And then at the end of the day, other people basically come around and pick it up. I mean, we need to understand that this is not a PPM problem. This is not a UDP problem. This is our problem. And it has to start from within the district. And this is the reason why I would love to see the district council set up where people within that district can sit back and say, you know what, the garbage is our problem. Let us find our own solution. But every single solution for this country cannot be inside the legislative assembly within this country. We need a participative democracy. We need more people involved in the process.
Okay. Now let's go to the banking sector, retail banking. I've heard people talk about their experiences. Well, we hear about a lot of foreclosures. That is one issue. We hear about additional fees that people have to pay for the cashing of a check if you do not have an account on at the bank or the institution where that check is drawn on. And there are some Caymanians and maybe non-Caymanians as well who don't have, bank accounts, as well. And anywhere, and anywhere between $1 and $5 fee that has to be paid, for that. Have you heard of those stores, or have you had any experiences in those areas, Mr. Macfield?
I've heard of those stories. I haven't had an experience with the cashing of the check, because every time I went to a bank that the check was drawn on that I didn't have an account, they didn't charge me any fees.
Mm-hmm.
They know you.
Huh?
They know you.
Yeah,
They hear of you.
they didn't charge me any fees.
Right.
But I have to be a little careful, because I'm a lawyer and I represent a few entities, a few banks. I represent one entity that loan monies and has mortgage accounts. So I have to be a little careful, that I don't engage in a conflict of interest. But I have never gone to a bank yet where they charged me for cashing a check where I didn't have an account. They will tell me they would say to me usually it's $1, but they would say we're not going to take it from you.
Okay. So they're selective in terms of who they
Yes.
take it from. Christy,
yeah.
and I know you come on the other side of things. And yesterday when we talked about this, you made some really valid points to me in terms of the cost of doing business for banks
And
as well.
remember what I said a while ago? I said between 2013 and 2005, with only 32.55 growth in the economy, the government took out an extra $207 million from the economy. People need to understand where this money came from, and more importantly, where this money went. I mean, that's one of the things we don't focus on. And because we don't have direct taxation, that my friend Nicky will talk about now, people directly don't see the impact of these government decisions. The average person isn't paying work permit fees unless they're taking out a permit for the helper is one thing, and they're not seeing. Now, a Class A license fee is roughly $1 million. Well, it is $1 million CI. So a bank, in essence, has to write roughly at 4% average interest rate on a loan, $25 million worth of loans. Then you talk about the light bill. Well, I can tell you from experience, $10 million worth of loans is what I needed to pay my light bill annually. I mean, just to kind of put things in context. And you're not even looking at staff costs. You're going $35 million worth of loans. And when you start looking at basically people borrowing less now within the economy, a lot of banks basically have to find creative ways now in which to make up all the different fees, plus also the loss of business in terms of loans and everything else. But I will say this much. I'm a big advocate for consumer protection and consumer rights. I mean, I understand that the banks need to make a profit. I understand that many people need to make a profit. That's what they go into business for. The problem is some of these banks, and I will say it, are making too big a profit. And yeah, they may probably burn across in my yard for saying it, but I know exactly what it is I'm saying. And if they want to call me and challenge me, I have no problem defending it. The problem is that we have in this country isn't a banking problem, the bank charging the fees or someone marking up. What we have in this country is a lack of consumer protection. What we have is a lack of the elected leadership in this country having the will to stand up for people and say no more. I don't want to just an editorial insulting me, because you know what? That editorial ain't taking money out of my pocket because I ain't buying a newspaper. What I have is a problem with the gas that I'm paying for. I have a problem with my CUC light bill, and I have a problem with the high cost of food in this country. And what I would like to see is that being given the same amount of interest and respect. It's been more than 6 months now since we've been promised a Public Utilities Commission. I haven't heard on it, and yet the people in my district who have to commute to town to come to work is spending more than the very people in Georgetown. And I feel bad for the people in East End and North Side, and even worse for the people in Cayman Brack, because they're even being ripped off even more than us. Despite even having a lower duty on fuel, they're actually even paying more, and the ship stops there too. So what we have in this country is a lack of political will to protect the people of this country. And until our leadership grow the testicular fortitude and start looking at what needs to be done in this thing, a lot of people are getting fed up. That's what needs to be done. So we don't have a problem with what a business wants to charge. What we have a problem with is a lack of consumer protection, and that's what we need in this country.
Okay. Now, Mr. Markfield, again, bearing in mind that you do represent a financial institution, on a foreclosure, if a person's home is well, first of all, we hear, I've heard stories of valuations being done, and they're being done at the behest of the loan holder, the institution that holds the loan, and the valuation is done based on what the loan holder wants the valuation to be. If let's say property is valued at $300,000 and there is an outstanding loan of $100,000, is it usual for the bank to auction or to seek the market value for the home and for the homeowner to get the rest of the funds, or are the financial institutions just simply looking to recoup their monies?
No, what happened is that the financial institution that has the loan or the mortgage has a duty to get the best market price for the property.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what they will do, they will go to court, and they will say they want to foreclose on the property, and they will get what they call a reserve price from the court. Yes, the reserve price will be what the evaluators say that the property is worth. Now, and more times than one, you are in the person who the money's been loaned to will get his valuation, and the institution will get their valuation, and they'll come to an agreement of this is what the property is valued. Yeah, that is what they would call a reserve price. Yes, then the property will then be offered to the public, and it depends if it's a public sale or a private sale. Yeah, and then the property will be offered for that sale. If they cannot reach that reserve price, they will come back to court before a judge, and they will say, we can't reach the reserve price. We would like to have the reserve price reduced. The judge will allow them to reduce the reserve price, and they would put the property on the sale for that price. Now, if the property is the problem, one of the problems with properties that are sold like that is that when people are aware that the property is being sold through a foreclosure, people are not going to offer the reserve price for the property or the real price for the property. They're going to hold out because they know that at some time the property has to be sold, and has to come down. And then what happens then is that the institution will sell the property for what they can get for it, what people will offer, because they say then the value of the property is what a willing purchaser a willing buyer will buy for, and what a willing seller will sell for.
But they still have to go back to the courts then to have that reserve price probably reduced again.
Reduced again.
So
and then what happens when that take place? The owner of the property then will usually lose their equity that they had in the property. That is the bad part of a foreclosure.
That's the lack of protection.
But it's not an arbitrary decision that is made by the lending institution. The court. That is important to know, because sometimes when you listen to people, you think that we have to go to a commercial break now, and then when we come back, we'll continue the discussion, folks. I want to remind you, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorit Connor. My guest with me this morning, Mr. Christopher Saunders, Mr. Steve Markfield. Please stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to For the Record. We're on the last leg of We are on the last leg of the show this morning with Mr. Christopher Saunders, Mr. Steve Macfield. We're talking about retail banking in the Cayman Islands, and you've heard Mr. Macfield explain some of the legal proceedings when it comes to foreclosures. And I guess despite anecdotal evidence, some people who have experienced situations with retail banking, with foreclosures and stuff like that, from one viewpoint, the banking institutions, the retail banking institutions may not be the monsters that they're sometimes portrayed to be. Not to say that there aren't difficulties in the area as well. Chris, you want to make some comments, and I want Mr. Macfield to further elaborate on some of the legal proceedings when it comes to foreclosures as well.
One of the things that I have a problem with is that no, banks are selecting their own valuators, and I have a problem generally with that. First of all, it shows that there's a relationship, and the valuator needs to be as independent as possible. And when you know that you're getting payment from a bank, then the question is, are you now fully independent? You look at the government building when the government was talking about at one point financing it. The range in terms of valuation for the government building, the government admin building, was between 70 million to 110 million, I think, if my memory serves me right. We're talking roughly more than a 50% difference in people who are supposed to be certified in this kind of business. So clearly there's already in question in terms of how some people can come to the conclusion that they can in some valuation. Last week, Friday, OC, and you were present when a person from a local bank had called me to raise an issue that within their own bank, they noticed that the bank got in an argument with a valuation company saying there's no way this valuation could be right. You need to send me back a different one at a lower price, or I'm not going to pay you, kind of thing. And this person really had a problem with that, because they're like saying, Chris, this should not have been happening. You know what I mean? And this is a local bank. Don't worry, I won't say who it is. But it is then the question I'm beginning to ask is how many other banks are doing that? Because if they're pushing back on these valuators saying, I'm not going to pay you because your valuation is too high, you need to lower the price. What people also fail to realize that they're also, when they lower the value, the bank can now basically go and sell it much quicker just to get their money back. And the consumer is basically their equity in the property is being wiped out. And that is one of the things when I said, no, that we need some kind of consumer protection. In the U.S., it's a little bit different because you got Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. You have the government out there that literally competes with other commercial banks in terms of even mortgage interest rates and everything else. So you can see on TV people getting 30-year fixed 2.75%, 3%, provided you have a good credit score and everything else. At least it gives you some kind of some level of competition within the market. But if you look at even banks in terms of even what they're charging in terms of interest rates and what they're using to benchmark it on, I mean, in terms of Cayman Prime and everything else, if you're going to be realistic, most banks should actually be charging LIBOR. I mean, I don't want to get into the old Federate type stuff because, like I said, the banks will probably come burn across in my yard. But I can tell you this much. What we do need in this country is more laws to protect our people. Because if not, people will always do what they can just to get away with it.
Okay, one caller online. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC, and your guest.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
I'm well. Talking about the banks, I think that to summarize it, the banks in Cayman is the biggest bunch of cartels that there is running up and down freely. They have a license. To I guess, for the lack of a better word, to swindle us out of every dollar they can find to do so. What surprised me is that a bank draft. Now, this is a bank draft. So I go to my bank and I order a bank draft to pay OC. OC takes that bank draft to his bank. They want to tell me rubbish. They want to tell you rubbish that it's going to be 4 days before that clears. Granted, this is money that is already accounted for because the bank is not going to issue a draft to you to an individual without the money's in their account already, right? And to tell me that this little place where the banks you can knuckle marbles in their distance and you can't get clearing done on CMD for a draft. Checks in general But from what I can understand, what they're doing is, so they hold your money and they use your money for three days, 4 days, and they make loads of interest off of your money in that time while they're holding it. Because I know someone who actually deposited a check in one of the banks and checked his bank, and when he checked his bank, the funds had already been deducted from his account, but yet in the bank that he put it in, he had both accounts in those banks that he put it in. The bank did not release the money until 4 days after. Yet the day after, the money was removed from his account. It is all, it is loads and loads of things going on, and there's nobody that is monitoring this stuff. I mean, they're charging, X amount, I think it's $1, and some banks it's $3 to change a check. That is their check, not in some other bank check, their check.
Well, what we'll do, caller, we'll have the banker in the room explain all of that for us. So please continue to listen, because we have one more caller, one final caller. We're going to take that caller, and then we're going to have Mr. Saunders, the banker, explain some of the banking intricacies to us. Please stay tuned. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, O.C. Good morning.
Good morning, Roop. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Roop.
Good morning, sir.
I heard you earlier. I didn't have time to listen all to the show because I had to do some stuff. But I heard you talking about the problems with roads and stuff, and securing the roads and things. And when I talk about these things, I'm not trying to sound like I'm an expert in all this stuff. But God gave me visions, that I use sometimes. And back in the day when I was down here as a budding architect, working with Doucette, I don't remember who it was I suggested, but it was somebody in government. I don't want to say it was Mr. Wassell, but it was somebody that I suggested at that time, because I saw the growth forthcoming of this island, tourism and so forth. And at that time, Raspberry Road was a really narrow, just a little 2-lane something, when I first started working there. And I told them then, I said, gentlemen, this is what we should do now, because I had studied stuff like that, urban development and all that at the time, and I thought I would give them this information. I said, what we have to do is secure all the, if you're going to do a master grand transportation plan, we have to secure all the road corridors now, because down the road it's going to cost us 10 times the money, depending how likely to do it. And I guess because I was a Caymanian and I was a young person, and who am I to come tell them what to do? And nobody did anything. And then we had to pay money for, even after the Hyatt was built, where we had to go through to get that piece crossed there. These are the things that I say that what we need in Cayman, gentlemen, this is my opinion now. What we need here is, we should not leave these things in the hand of politicians. There should be some body, I don't know what you call it, whatever it is, but whose job that is mixed up, made up of different people, with intelligent people who knowledgeable about these things. And they sit down and they look at things, and they then come up and tell government, look, this is what we suggest you should do. And this is how it should be done. Because once we start, if every time we get a new government, they whatever the other guys were doing, to scrap it, and then they got to look for something else to do.
Okay. Need you to get to the point, though, caller. We get running out of time.
The point is this. What I'm saying is, gentlemen, is this, that we have to stop procrastinating, get it done, get it started at least, and then we'll have it. Because this is what happens when we sit down and everybody gets in, and they don't want to. They got to have credit for whatever's done. And this is the kind of thing that it's small town politics, I call it. So I hope that we can get over this. And I think about the money that the dock has cost us over these years, from the time, I don't know, way back when they had the first estimate on what it was costing them. And it's just sad, though. It's just not, and this is not pointing the finger at any particular person, but this is what happens in Cayman, and that's why we don't get anything done. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, caller. We said that was the last caller, but another one has come in, so we're going to take that caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, O.C.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Morning to your guest as well. This is Eddie Thompson.
Good morning,
Hey,
Mr.
bro,
Thompson.
morning.
Yeah, I just tuned in because someone messaged saying you were had raised my name. I want to speak just real quickly. I've been 30 years in the construction / architectural and business. I've actually developed some properties myself in Newlands. And one of the topics you touched on real quick was the valuation situation. And I'm going to give you a real life scenario. The current way in which this is practiced right now is actually, in my opinion, basically deflating values in properties in the lesser developed areas or towards the eastern districts. Anywhere that's high tourism, it's a fantastic model. But case in point, I developed a 5-acre subdivision. I put in a model house which I ended up buying for myself, and I invested significant amounts of money to put in insulation, not your standard insulation, but spray foam insulation, which is double, triple the cost of your regular insulation. I put styrofoam on the outside of my walls to make sure I had an energy efficient house. I got double glazed windows. I had porcelain tiles as opposed to ceramic. The list goes on and on. Everything was considered quote unquote upgrades. I then proceed to sell properties within there, and the owners built their homes. Difference being that they didn't do the same thing. And in fact, I built 3 other homes to a lesser, spec because the clients didn't want the styrofoam and the insulation and the higher level stuff. But my house, and then they turn around, build those houses and sell them, and I go and get my house valuated for banking and insurance purposes, and they're telling me my house is not worth what I have invested into it because the houses around me were selling for less dollars per square foot than what I was claiming my house was worth. They never took into account the fact that I have hurricane-rated windows and a higher efficiency, energy efficiency, and all of that carries a value. They don't look at it that way. They don't look at it as the fact of what you have invested into it. They look at what 10, 15 houses that sold around there within 12 months, and then they just do an average divided by the number what it sold for by the number of houses that sold, and they come up with an average number. Go, here you go.
And you don't necessarily agree with that concept that they use.
It can't be right, because what it tells me is if I take and I buy and I build a 6,000 square foot mansion in the middle of Frank Hall home subdivision, that my house is only going to be worth per square foot what Frank Hall is selling his houses per square foot. That's me in a very simplistic form, but that's the core way in which they're valuing these things.
Okay.
Of course, because you have a 6,000 square foot house that's very high, and you might have a little more influence. But in general, that's what they're tending to do. I've had this argument many times with them, and the thing about it gets me about it is these are the same people who work in firms who actually do what you call quantity surveying, which is they break the cost of the house down based on, and so that you can go to the contractors, know what you should be expecting, what the contractors are going to come back to you to build this. So they price it out with the ceramic tiles versus the porcelain tiles. They know the difference, but when it comes to valuing, they won't consider that, or they aren't considering that.
All right, caller. Thank you very much for that. Thanks, for that information, Mr. Mark Field. We're running out of time, but very quickly, you were explaining something in terms of the foreclosures, and Mr. Saunders, referred to incidents in terms of the valuation done by the lender as opposed to evaluation done by the homeowner. And again, just for the benefit of our audience, the legal proceedings that must be involved in that before any decision is made.
Yeah, like I say, first of all, when the bank wants to foreclose, they make an application for foreclosure application to the courts. They go to court and they get a foreclosure application. The loan or the mortgage is foreclosed, and then at the same time they might ask that for an evaluation of the property. And they might also ask for vacant occupancy of the property, so that the owner can have to vacate the property within so much time. The courts will usually give them foreclosure. The courts will then say, Well, you get a valuation, and they will probably, or usually, give the owner the prerogative to get his own valuation. They will set a date and come back to court, and the courts will then decide on how they are going to structure the valuation of the property. That is usually agreed between the two entities. This is the valuation, and then that will be called, that will call the reserve price, that of what the house is going to be offered to the market for. Now, usually the owner will be given a time to leave the property, but once the bank has foreclosed on the property, or the bank could leave the person in the property also until the property is sold. The problem that the owner is going to have is that once it is known publicly that the property is going to be foreclosed, then everything is not the same anymore, because a prospective buyer knows that the property is a foreclosed property, and he is going to wait for the price to come down because the property has to be sold. And so what happens then is that the banks or the lending institution cannot sell the property for the reserve price. They have to come back to the court to get that reduced, and they will come back to the court to get that reduced until they'll have an offer.
Okay, Chris, on the caller's question in relation to the bank drafts and the 4-day clearance period, any clarification that you can give on that?
I think one of the things that people need to be mindful of is that checks are still today very high risk. You'll go to many business places and you will see they will tell you point blank they don't want your check. I mean, they prefer the debit card, credit card. I mean, those are instant verification to some extent. I mean, a check at the end of the day is still a physical piece of paper. And just to kind of give people an idea, you go in today and you deposit a check into your account. The teller processes it. Until the teller clears off within the day, I mean, that check, so it depends on when the bank processes it, when they clear off. The bottom line is that check is still sitting there, still hasn't gone for any verification or anything yet. The next morning, a group of people comes in, and they have a department, like the operations department inside the bank. Now, it depends on the volume of transaction, because we still do a lot of heavily transactional banking in Cayman, which is still very people kind of process thing there. So you come in the next day where someone comes through, they sort out all the different bank. This is checks are for bank A, bank B, bank C, bank D, and they sort all of that out. Now, every morning the banks meet, and it rotates around every 6 months, where at 10 o'clock the next morning they'll meet at a particular location. Depends on the volume of checks sometimes. So if someone is closing off within the day, it depends on, like I said, how much staff the bank has and everything else. That check may not reach the clearing, because the banks actually physically meet in one location.
Okay.
And they're like, this is your checks, these are your checks, these are your checks. And they literally give everybody the checks. Then a person goes back to their banks and they start inputting the checks within the system. And again, it depends on the amount of, because some banks do a lot more checks than others. And as a result, they need to put it inside their account. I mean, it is still very people thing. One thing I can say, we probably can do it quicker. But you know what that will require? That will require some kind of outsourcing. You can send it to a back place in India or somebody to start doing it. But the reality of it is going to end up costing Caymanian jobs. So it's kind of one of those things.
Why can't it be done here in Cayman?
Well, the cost. I mean, it is. I mean, if you think realistically, paying someone to either scan a check in and then load them off and send them electronically, I mean, that in itself, I'm not going to say it's brain surgery, but the question is how much you're going to pay someone to do that when, in fact, these machines, you can just load them up, they send them to someone and sort it out. So it is kind of one of those things. And at the same time, too, when I said fraud, you got to think about it also. If someone comes in, OC, and writes a check against your account, you know what I mean? Where it needs a certain amount of days where you yourself can also notice, wait a minute, did someone just took money out of my account too?
So it can be a double-edged
sword.
So
it is kind of one of those things. And this is not, I would love to say that it's a problem unique to Cayman. It is not. You can go Google, look at it. It's a problem in the US, a problem in the UK, and this is why everyone is back to pushing debit and credit cards, where everything is electronic versus you're moving pieces of papers among each individual. They got check for signature, they got check for this, they got check for that. It's a very manual intensive process, and I don't envy anyone doing it.
But you mentioned that, and it's funny that you should mention that, because I think there's a recent report, either yesterday or today, in the UK, where they have pointed out, the regulators have pointed out that the banks have fallen so far behind as far as technology is concerned because they have failed to invest in new technologies to keep them up to speed with what's happening. So some of the rudimentary and the labor-intensive work that is being done could be probably alleviated if they were to invest in proper technologies.
I want to leave something for people to also consider, is that the minute each of those checks with their barcodes, it gives your account number, that's your signature and everything like that. The minute you start sending that stuff electronically, and someone start getting your account number and your signature and everything else, you're also opening up again yourself to another type of probably identity theft or something. But it is one of the last vestiges. And the problem I can tell you what I do have a problem with, though. I mean, just to lend some balance, is when Steve would write me a check here. I hope you write me one. You go to the bank note. That's a demand stuff where someone is sitting there, and someone is saying, Steve, give them my cash. You know what I mean? And then someone's going to charge them for taking money back out from the same bank because you're not an account holder or something. I think that is one of the things I think is a little bit ridiculous. But at the same time, as I said to you before, when you look at the $207 million that the core government has come in and taken out the economy, and bearing in mind that banks and other places are the ones that got hit. I mean, several years back, a Class A license fee was $400,000. Today it's $1 million in the space of no time. So when you start looking at what the additional cost is, I mean, electricity costs and everything else, I mean, we complain about bills. I remember when the Class A went to $1 million, I said to the finance person at the time, you realize you have just lost the right to sit down and dictate the banks now, because do you know much we have to literally do to find $1 million just for a license fee?
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so it's a catch-22.
Quick final comments from both of you, because we have to close off now. Very, very quickly, very quick.
What I would say is that it seems to me that a lot of people that we elect forget how our communities came about. We do not understand how this island was brought, how the communities were brought together. We do not know our country anymore, and we do not know it enough. And it seems that our political attention is now focused on our differences, rather on the unique rational communities that we have built together. That seems to be the problem in Cayman, and that is the reason why we have places flooding down in Barton Town.
Okay, Chris, quickly.
When you consider that we have a population that can fit in an entire stadium in some places, there is really no reason for us to sometimes have the challenges that we have. What I would say to people, and I would say this to a lot, read more, understand, move away sometimes from just, I don't want to use I'm going to say that the pettiness sometimes in terms of how it is that we do things and we look at things. I mean, a little bit of research sometime, and we can find a solution, but what we do require in this country, seriously, is the will. I mean, unfortunately for us, I have never been a fan of term limits, but you know what? Maybe it's something that we need to start looking at. I came across an article once where they're asking a lot of these congressmen who lost their elections, if they knew they were going to lose the election, what would they do different? And they actually said, you know what? I would have done this more, I would have done this, I would have done that, because I realized I wouldn't have gotten a chance to do it. But we have created politics almost as a profession inside this country for some people. And what is really sad is that a lot of them are getting paid a lot of money to do absolutely nothing. And the people's lives are being miserable. There is no way for a country to be sitting on over $100 million in surplus, and we have the problems that we have at Comba Avenue. We have the problems that we have at the Lighthouse School. We have the problems that we have even at the NWDA. There is no reason for it. But what it does require some level of will. And I'm going to say to people, listen, in order for our democracy to work, you need to be informed. You need to be aware. And more importantly, you need to speak up. I mean, this is what this thing is about.
And, of course, for the record, we'll try to keep you informed, and it will provide a platform for you to speak out as well. Folks, I want to remind you that you've been listening to For the Record. I have been your host, Orrit Connor, and my guest with me this morning, the usual two for the Markfield Saunders show on Friday mornings, Mr. Christopher Saunders, Mr. Steve Markfield. I want to remind you all in the Georgetown Community Central Scranton Community Committee having their Father's Day celebration Saturday, tomorrow, June 20th from 6 p.m. Please show up there. Everyone is invited. Lots of entertainment. Food, don't even mention it. Lots of good cooking down there in the Scranton Mall. I want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who is less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you choose not to do that, then please, please donate to a worthy charity. We should always remember those who need, not necessarily those who want. I ask you to have a great weekend. Continue to listen to Radio Cayman. Continue to listen to Breeze 105.3 FM. Follow the proceedings in the Finance Committee of the Legislative Assembly. And, of course, join Sterling Dwayne Ebanks at 12 noon for talk today as well. And, of course, for the record, we'll be back on Monday morning when we will have government representatives here as well. And I say to you, have a great weekend. Stay safe and God bless.